We are Mine Explorers, episode 11,
Woo-hoo.
with JP Jutras, who is in Canada, and he's joining us virtually.
Our
I'm
first virtual
so
guest.
happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's exciting. We've known JP for, I was trying to figure it out today. I think we met in 2016. So it's been 9 years almost.
Well, beyond that, which is what happens to people in our profession, is we meet in all sorts of strange places.
Right.
Because the first time that we met on the phone was when I called your company to say I need to do some staking, and then you came out with Crystal, and then so the first time we met was in Washington State in the rainy forest, and there was a staking program going on, but you also did some prospecting and you helping us out, and it was wonderful. And then the next job was, well, you did a great job in Washington. Can you come to Wyoming? Because we're doing something there too. So we go from the western rainforest to the desert of the inlands.
Yep.
Yeah, Wyoming was a lot closer.
Yeah, it's way easier terrain in a lot of ways and way harder in others.
Oh yeah. Well, it was funny because when we met you in Washington, we were like, "What is he doing out here?" Like we couldn't.
I also wonder what am I doing out there all the time.
Yeah,
But
we
then
had no
but then
idea.
the third time
Yeah.
was we all met in Shanghai,
Yep.
Yeah. And that was.
and then back to Wyoming.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now we're meeting over electrons, which
Yeah.
is kind of even stranger.
It is in a way, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, and in between we've met in Canada, in Vancouver, and in Calgary, and we went on a road trip together last fall before last.
Yeah.
This goes by quick.
Oh, that was lovely.
Countries now.
Yeah, 3 different countries.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, and really also not uncommon in our industry.
No.
Yeah, there's some clients I've met with. One guy in particular I've met with in 5 different countries.
Yep.
Pretty interesting, yeah. Different mining conferences and things. So speaking of different countries, I know you have a lot of stories of world travels and adventures as a young geology student and throughout your career. So let's tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, I can give you the short how I got into geology story, but it's going to be somewhat different than how I got into Jade. But let's start with the geology thing. So, as a kid, I was always happier just being in nature. The world just always called to me because, you're at home and there's some problems and people are arguing and fighting and stuff like that, and you just kind of grab your peanut butter sandwich and go out to the forest near to your house. And I was always inspired by the fact that when you're out there in nature, there's a symphony and a harmony that, yes, there's life and there's death and there's chaos and there's tragedy, but it was almost like there was a symphony I could not put my finger on, and it always intrigued me, as opposed to the symphony of or the bad rap song of human interactions. So
Yeah, I
so
think that's pretty common. There seems to be a common thread of love of the outdoors and nature in our industry for sure.
there is, and I grew up in Quebec in the 70s and 80s, and really, with the economy the way it was going in Quebec, you kind of had a choice, which is stick around, do whatever, be unemployed and get addicted, and hope for government handouts. Or in Canada, we have a saying, and the saying is not uncommon. It says, "Go west, young man."
Yeah.
So So I kind of cut all my ties in many ways, and I came out to start a university degree in Edmonton. And my first, because I had such an affinity or a desire to be in nature as my profession, my first choice in direction was to do a forestry degree,
Okay.
become a forestry engineer.
Yeah.
And I did spend 2 summers planting trees, which is kind of contributing to the thing, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah. See a lot of rocks doing that too.
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah, there were a lot of rocks. And I also took Geology 101 kind of introductory university course,
Rocks for jocks, they call it.
Rocks for Jocks,
Yeah. Geo.
and
Yeah.
this teacher that I had, Dr. Roger Morton, he shone with so much passion as a teacher that I just wanted to go and talk to him. And at the time, he was kind of a Brit, and he spoke with a heavy British accent, but he had stories from being all over the world, looking at rocks, and at the time, coming from Quebec, with my mother language being French, I was a bit of a frog. And after a few of these courses or these classes, I went to him and I said, Dr. Morton, this geology thing, it sounds very interesting. And he said, why are you here? I said, well, I I don't have the math background to take a more advanced science course, so I get into rocks and jocks.
Yeah.
But my trajectory is that I want to work in nature, but I also want to have a profession.
Right.
Right.
He says, so what are you doing? He says, well, I'm looking for forestry engineer. And he asked me very simple questions. He said, okay, why do you want to do forestry engineering? I said, because I want to be out in nature. So, okay. Um, how much of the earth is covered in trees?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
It was a life-changing question.
Yeah.
And I had no idea, so I just pulled a number out of
Yeah.
the air, and I kind of went like maybe like 10%, and he went like it's more like 3% because you have to exclude the oceans and
Mhm.
everything else.
Wow. I would have guessed like 20% just thinking about it, but there's a lot of the land that has no trees.
I mean, you look at Wyoming, there's
Yeah,
no
I mean
trees.
Wyoming. I'm thinking about Wyoming. There's some trees in Wyoming, but
Yeah,
yeah,
the
it's
vast
like
majority of
3%.
it,
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
and he was talking about harvestable trees.
Okay,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
But even just regular trees, yeah, I mean
It's tiny. It's
yeah.
tiny. And don't quote me on that number. I haven't researched it or anything, right?
No, it sounds about right. I mean, when you say harvestable, because most of the lumber in the world really comes from some small regions. Like
Right.
most of the softwood in the United States comes from Georgia. And by like a percentage of the country, it's a small
But it gets
percentage.
the point across that there's
Yeah.
not a lot of trees out
Right.
there to forest.
Right.
Yeah, because by the time you take out the oceans, the lakes, all the water things, you take out the ice caps, you take out the deserts, you take out the savannas. It's not that much.
Mhm.
But then his second question was, do you like to travel? And I was a kind of fairly open-minded young man at the time. I'm still fairly open-minded. And I said, yeah, I love to travel. And he said, well, if you become a forestry engineer in Canada, you will learn about spruce and pine. Like, would you like to go to Brazil? To me, there was an exotic destination, and I went like, yeah, Brazil sounds like a great place to go. And he says they don't have any spruce and they don't have any pine.
They do not.
You know, I'm walking through the process here,
Yeah.
um, and then I'm kind of starting to feel a little bad, and he goes, well, if you want to be a professional and you want to have a career and you like to travel, compare how much of the earth is covered in harvestable trees versus how much of the planet is covered in rocks. And then I didn't know it at the time, but he says, once you learn about the rocks, they're the same rocks everywhere.
Right.
So you're getting a very, very portable education that gives you leverage to apply your trade in any one place.
Yeah.
Then he told me the kicker. So you want to be in an industry that allows you to be outdoor and work in nature, but here's the reality. If you become a forestry engineer in Canada, you're going to have one of two jobs. You're either going to work for the forestry company or the government, and all you will do is fill out forms.
That's so
Yeah.
terrible.
Dude, well, he made the choice easy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he absolutely knew what he was doing.
It's nice to have those people who can kind of help point you in the right direction because, yeah, not everything's what it seems. Like, if you think about a job like that, you're like, yeah, outdoors, I'm in nature, I'm taking care of trees, planting trees, and then, yeah, in reality,
You're a pencil pusher.
yeah, I mean, I know some forestry guys, and mostly in the southeastern US because they happen to own and control land that also has minerals on it.
Right.
And they spend a lot of time just driving around, driving around, the properties looking at stuff, and I'm sure there's a ton of paperwork and everything involved. Pretty interesting though. Yeah,
Well, hey, at least they get to drive around, which is,
right,
that was kind of the point, right? It was like I wanted to be out there.
right. Well,
That's
they're
my
driving
happy place.
in the same counties, but it's all within, yeah, I mean, it's two, three types of pine that are found everywhere, but they're only grown commercially in the southeast and a couple other regions. It's pretty interesting.
So, JP,
Right.
once you graduated from school, where was the first place that you ventured off to?
Well, I had some placements while I was a student. So year 3 and 4 of my geology program, I worked in British Columbia in northern Canada, which is where the first Jade adventure happened, but we'll skip that for now.
Yeah, we'll get into
Um,
it, I promise.
Yeah.
and then when I graduated, we were a class of 42 graduates, and the industry is so cyclic, right?
Yeah,
So there were, out of 42 graduates, there were 2 job offers.
Wow.
wow.
But that's the kind of job offer you're looking for as a graduate, which is, local company, does it have benefits, blah, blah, blah. But I was approached by a company that says we're working in South America, we're working in Guyana, which at the time was the third shittiest country on the planet to work in for a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
And I kind of went like, I became a geologist to travel, so I took that job. Um, and then I worked in British Guyana, and then Suriname, French Guyana, Brazil, and then I came back and It was the US and then Mexico. Then I went to West Africa and 3 countries for a while. Came back, Mexico again. So like all the travel that I could have wanted.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to fill the passport with 100 countries. I need to be in 17 countries and have a good time.
Right,
Right.
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 Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm sure you might have had the same experience, whether it's like just regionally in the US or whatever, right? Um, you, oh, what do you do? I'm a mineral exploration geologist. So then the second question is, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then where are you working now? Well, I'm working in Mexico. And then people try to relate it to what they do, right? It says, oh, I've been to Cancun once. Have you been there?
Right.
Like, no, the airplane lands somewhere, and then I get a truck to go in the mountains, and then I hop on a donkey for 2 days.
Yeah.
And you know, the places I've been to where we have to bring 3 weeks worth of food because there is no store.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's no, I haven't been to Cancun.
It's quite different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get it. I just say I'm in mining and people go, what do you mine?
Yeah.
And it's like, whatever. Anything that needs to be mined, but we don't mine it, but we find it and
Yeah.
help set it up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, totally. So, it's been, for me, I could not have been more blessed than to get the advice of Dr. Morton. Because I think he could read me a little bit, right? He goes like, "Oh, this guy's a little off the edge. Um,
He's gonna get bored with the
he's gonna get bored. It's like he's not gonna fill out forms.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's a roamer. He's really open, um, but still conscientious. So yeah, let's put him down on that career path." And then I had a second mentor because I've never worked in the public sector. I've always been in the private sector. So the entrepreneurs, the public companies.
Yeah.
Uh, I was blessed with my first jobs that were like shit jobs, where I was getting paid $80 Canadian a day, which would be about $50 US for you guys.
Yeah. The shitty jobs, they're
Yeah.
important.
Mhm.
And
Everybody's gotta have one.
Oh, yeah.
and and it was like 3 to 5 months at a time in the jungle. You don't even get a tent; you get a screen net,
Ugh.
right?
Ooh.
But I loved it because the world was wide open, and
Yeah.
I had a sense that if I worked hard and I produced essentially what we do as mineral exploration geologists is produce data
Yep.
Mhm.
for the company to put together, and then at some point you put the data together and you say there's nothing here, we leave, or there's something here and we keep going.
Yep.
And that might become an economic mineral deposit that is a mine. You've heard it in your career. Most gold exploration geologists will never see visible gold in their career.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I have 2 or 3 times is all, and we've been in thousands of mines.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I remember the first time I did, and it was exciting, but we didn't find it in an outcrop, and it wasn't greenfield. We were down in a mine, and it was in a pillar of an abandoned mine. It was like
Sure.
during the Civil War, and it was pretty cool to see. But I imagine, yeah, finding it in an outcrop somewhere that was unknown would be like,
That'd be incredible.
but yeah, I mean, how many geos get to do that?
Well, I got to do that a lot.
That's
And
awesome.
then there's another kind of stat that's out there, and it needs to be updated. I don't know what's going on, but it was if you're on a grassroots project, only one out of 15,000 grassroots project will actually move to feasibility.
Yeah, I've revised and tweaked those numbers a bunch of different times, and it's really commodity specific, but like world class precious metals, base metals, that's definitely the number. If it's like sand and gravel
That's
or
different.
something else, it can
Yeah.
be smaller, but like anything that's really worth sinking the money into on a big scale where you're using ultra class trucks, yeah. Extremely.
I've been blessed in the fact that one can never say I found a deposit, because putting a deposit together is always a team effort.
Absolutely, yeah.
But 5 of the projects that I've worked on went to production in my very short career.
Wow.
Plus one project, it has not gone to production yet, but we put together a porphyry, which is a bit of a challenge.
Oh yeah.
And as an exploration group, we did sell it to a producer, and now they're stuck in all the permitting stuff and everything like that, right? So it's been very productive. I mean, I look back on what I've been doing, and I'm pretty happy with the track record.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal track record.
I mean, 5 mines into production, that's amazing. Was that all gold or gold, copper, and what were the commodities for those?
The one that we sold?
Yeah, well, the 5 projects that went to
The first 5 were all gold.
all gold.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, to put those numbers into perspective, so we're a consulting firm, so we touch 50 projects at a time on average. We have at some scale, and we've done over 5,000 projects. And of those, we've only helped put a handful into production.
Yeah.
And that's like a much larger base to draw from. But to be part of the core team and actually put 5 into production
that's impressive.
amazing. And as gold mines, we've put no gold mines into production. All of the projects we've helped on that are gold related are all still in exploration or permitting, or the ones that weren't already in production.
Right.
Yeah, because we definitely have worked on plenty that are already in production. But yeah, that's cool. That's a very unique experience.
It's been satisfying. Now, like, what's the most unsatisfying has been some of the projects that I worked on, which, after 6 to 12 months, if you start with that kind of track record, that, okay, I'm working on a project, and this is one of the 15,000 that might have a chance to go.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it might be bigger than all the other ones, because now you've got a frame of reference, you've got a database.
Yeah.
And the biggest projects I've worked on, none of them have gone because of political risk, commodity risk, change in governments. The biggest gold project I ever worked on, which was silly and stupid. Change of government, walk away.
Wow.
Biggest diamond project I ever worked on, government corruption. There's just no way forward.
Right.
Walk away.
Yeah.
Man, that's frustrating.
I mean, that's definitely arguably worse than 30 years of red tape in a safe jurisdiction, is just losing everything. But yeah, that's tough.
However, at the same time, what it tells us is that everybody is kind of losing their hair, and I don't have any hair because I get rid of mine every morning, about how we're running out of everything.
Right.
And there's going to be resource austerity happening. And it's the biggest projects I've seen are not in production yet.
Right.
And if you look at some of the recent discoveries, that now that there's been some kind of incentivization about exploration over the last 2 or 3 years, and by incentivization, what I mean is it's acceptable to do it. You're not just going to get beaten by being an explorer.
Right.
In Canada, we've had discoveries that are the drill intercepts in terms of copper, gold, and some of them silver, lead, zinc. They are things coming out today out of new exploration projects that, as explorers in the 1990s, for example, we could have only fantasized about.
Wow.
Wow.
And part of that is because the technology is getting better.
Right.
The industry has been so decimated that you only have the most dedicated, committed performers left.
Yeah, I talked about that just yesterday.
Yeah, because we've noticed that just in our client base
It's
recently.
shaken out all the weekends.
Within the last
Everybody who's left is serious.
probably 7 years, we've noticed that we're seeing less and less of the pump and dump guys.
Yeah, they've
Right.
all crypto. They're all in crypto and cannabis now.
They can have them.
Well, you've also noticed that if the market starts bubbling, they'll be back.
They'll be back. I actually,
Yeah, our team is ready though.
Our
They're
team's
trained.
ready, and I actually just did a little video yesterday about that like, watch out, they'll come back, but keep an eye on the people who have been there. People who have continued to advance projects over the past decade
They have
diligently.
Yep.
Keep investing in those people and just ignore the noise.
Right.
And there's good teams, and the thing is with that, like, that doesn't mean we can't still invest in young, new talent and things. But if you look who they have on their boards and who their advisors are, they tie back to the people who have been diligent, they've been doing the good work, and so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I don't want to disparage anyone, but if you've got this new mineral exploration company that kind of comes out like a mushroom, and most of the board are like real estate promoters,
Yeah.
or pot people or crypto people.
Yeah.
I don't doubt for a second that they might be committed entrepreneurs,
Right.
but the skill set.
Yep. The skill set and just knowing, like you said earlier, it's all data collection, and there's skill in how you collect the data, how you curate the data, and most importantly, how you interpret the data.
Mhm.
And you've got to have those guys on your board and advisors, and they're not hard to get if you're legit and you have interesting things going on. It's not hard to get those guys to come on board, but you only get one shot at it.
Right. I can just imagine seeing a lot of AI technology coming on board to interpret your data and then.
And there's a lot it can do there, and that's a whole nother topic I think we could go on for a while.
Oh, yeah. And speculate on.
Yeah, because there's a lot it can do there, and I think it's really interesting. But to build the tools and the models that can actually interpret everything well, you need that experience.
You need the people who actually can read it and interpret it. Yeah.
Right. And I think the biggest one there, in terms of what we do in mineral exploration, is, in theory, you should sample everything.
Yeah.
Right. You have a sample collection point every square foot on this property that might be 30 square miles.
Then you run all the analytics, you run all the elements, you run everything, yeah.
You run everything, except that's not how it works because it's expensive, it's time consuming, and therefore your first kind of gatekeeper is the geologist on the ground or the tech on the ground he might walk 5 miles in a day, but his job is to say, because a mine is different than everything else. That's why it's a mine.
Right.
Right. So you got to walk that 5 miles and say, doesn't look like much, doesn't look like much, doesn't look like much. Not spending money here, not spending all the money in the world here. Oh, this is interesting because it's different than the rest of it. And a mine by definition is an anomaly. So we will spend money to sample here.
Right.
So that's your first input.
Yeah.
And in terms of using AI is only going to use the data that has been fed. And we already know that the first filter is the field person that says we're only sampling 5% or 10%. When you're very advanced, you've focused and you've limited the scope, and then you say, okay, now let's spend all the money looking at this one thing that fits the bill so we can limit the cost. And then once the data is in, yeah, we can use AI, but the AI model cannot deal with what has not been inputted.
Right.
Right.
And for almost a segue, for most of my career, I guess I was a bad rogue AI. Most of the projects that I worked on where the directions changed is that everybody was going back to the same project and sampling the same thing because they knew what results to expect.
Yeah.
And my thing was, oh, but look over here. Has anybody looked at this? And people were like, well, that takes a bit of walking around, and it's beer o'clock, or my shift is over, or whatever, right? So I've been the person that just walks off and takes the extra samples that, in the context of today's discussion, the AI needs to say, oh, this is really different.
Right.
Right. So there's
Yeah.
an interesting symbiotic relationship that still needs boots on the ground.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Boots on the ground for sure. And there's no replacement for that. I mean, we built our mineralocity tool, and we built the aggregates version that does all this market analysis of everything for aggregates, and it has geology, generalized geology, and we've tied producers to geology, which is helpful. Okay, this granite has active production on it, there's mines around, and then we even have overburden data and things like that. In certain areas, we take well logs and digitize them and stuff, but I tell everybody every time I talk about it, this is all great and it gets you in the right area, but you still got to go poke holes in the ground. And sometimes you don't even need to do that. You just need to go walk around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's poking holes in the ground. But yeah, there's no substitute for boots on the ground. Yeah. So speaking of boots on the ground, you've walked over a lot of jade.
You might say that.
Yeah.
Except I haven't. It's not the way that particular one worked. Because, I understand that I'm working in areas where 1,000 prospectors have spent 10,000 days.
Yeah.
Looking for the jade, right?
And they still do. I mean, there's still avid
They
collectors who
Oh, yeah.
comb.
they still do. Um, and you know, we have projects. I have projects in Washington State, and essentially a prospector discovery on a road cut to start with.
Road cuts are great for that. Yeah.
There should always be a geologist behind a road cut.
Yeah, we're talking
Definitely.
about Crystal's gonna make a road cut calendar someday.
Yes, yes, I heard about that.
Yeah.
Well, it's like it's free exploration. Why not capitalize on the work that's already being done?
Oh yeah, I
Absolutely.
love it. Yeah, I've seen coal seams and road cuts. I've seen nice like collapsed breccias, like Carlin type, Long Canyon that are mineralized. I've seen phosphate in road cuts. Yeah.
Have you heard the story of the discovery of Sudbury?
No, I haven't.
Well, one of the stories, because there's always many stories.
Of course, bigger the discovery, the more stories there are.
Yes, yes, and Sudbury has been in production for, well, close to 100 years. I mean, it's one of the
Yeah.
biggest nickel, copper, platinum, PGE producer in the universe outside of Norilsk. And the story I heard when I was in university, and at that time my teachers were in their 70s, so they were young geologists or baby geologists when this stuff was happening. They said, so we were building railways. And when you build a railway, you got to blast a bunch of stuff and this and that.
Yeah.
And one of the people involved in the laying down the line was a blacksmith, right? Because rail, nails, hammers,
Yeah.
and they don't get to go back to the hotel that night after their shift, right? You just kind of travel with the project, and so the tenting program was happening along the way, and you go on the job for like 8 months.
Wow.
And as they had blasted through the Sudbury area and they blasted through the mineralized complex, this blacksmith was he was warming his dinner with his oil lamp, and a fox came into camp and tried to steal food. And they shooed it away. And then he came back, and they shoot it away, and then he came back again. I'm sure I have this completely wrong, but I'm keeping with the theme.
Right.
And at some point, the blacksmith just takes his hammer, waits for the fox to come, and tries to nail it. And when his hammer hits the outcrop, it makes sparks because it's hitting massive sulfides.
Right.
Mhm.
And not only that, but when you hit massive sulfides, it smells like sulfur.
Got a really interesting smell. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that brought people's attention to the fact that something really strange was going on. Because you might have already lain 300 kilometers or 200 miles of rail line, but here's the only place where it smells and looks like this, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh
And
yeah.
then,
Not a rock laying that much rail for sure.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so apparently this was, the discovery. So yeah, the road cut calendar, amazing. The first real jade discovery in Washington through the road cut. But then we have to switch the channel a little bit because people have known about this little thing and people have they've gone to the outcrop and they've picked out all the jade that was there, right? Because it occurs in lenses. And the way a prospector thinks and the way a geologist thinks are very different.
Right.
Uh, I can relate that to the first time you guys you two came to Wyoming in 2018. Like you walked a lot of ground because you did a lot of staking.
We
Mhm.
did. And we
And
collected a whole bunch of rocks to show you. And None of them were jade.
That's right. That's right. So you're already up there, right? But the idea is, so the prospector is reactive.
Right,
I'm going to walk around 1,000 days, and if I find two pieces, I'm happy.
right.
The the professional responsibility of a geologist is to become predictive.
Yes,
It's not about finding two pieces.
right.
It's about understanding whether this particular area where this material is found has the potential to have an economic deposit. So now you have to look at, okay, are we going to do some mapping? Are we going to do some drilling? Are we going to do some studies about the formation of it? Because ultimately, if you only got two pieces, hey, you got a good story. If you have 1,000 tons, you might have a business.
Right. Yeah,
And it's
I like that. It's proactive and predictive. Predictive and yeah, I mean, it's
predictive versus reactive.
versus
Right.
reactive, yeah,
Right.
because it's not, and the prospector will, if he finds two pieces, do a lot more looking near where the two pieces are. But the
Right,
geologist goes, why are these here? And then starts
right.
looking all around in a much broader area to
Yeah.
see, okay, what caused these to be here? And
Well,
that's really
especially if you're in an area where you already know that there's been at least 10,000 days of walk in the ground.
yeah.
So you know that as a geologist, the evidence that you need to find is gone.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right, so you have to find the root of it.
Yeah.
You
it's
have to
amazing.
you have to solve the riddle of why it was there and is there anything left.
Right.
Right.
And we're going to come back to Jade because one of my favorite movies, and this is one that I illustrate this concept with. One of my favorite movies is Fool's Gold with Matthew McConaughey, and it's a great cast. It's a great story, and it speaks to everyone because everyone wants to find treasure.
Right.
And then I go to in a sense, the development of my professional career, including when we were in Shanghai together in 2019. And seeing this exhibition of absolutely incredible carved treasure as out of jade.
But yeah, I've never seen anything like that.
No.
And it's something that I didn't know existed at all.
Not to that scale.
But you see it, and then you see how they're doing it.
Yeah.
And, carving paper thin bases by hand. And it's just
This is
mind blowing.
gorgeous.
Trees with translucent leaves that are all carved out of a single piece of jade.
Or the chain links, that was amazing.
Yeah, that level of craftsmanship, I don't think it exists anywhere else in any
I've
other.
never seen anything else like it.
Yeah, it just
But-
doesn't.
And then so on that, which has really changed my life. I go, first we were in the presence of something that we looked at it and we knew that this is going to last 10,000 years. This is a work of art that will be cherished and passed on, or maybe there's going to be a war, it's going to be stolen and hoarded,
Right.
right?
Nobody's throwing any of that stuff out. Yeah, it's much too rare and valuable, no matter what. I mean, it's not like, yeah, it's gonna be.
It's not a trinket.
Yeah, it's not a trinket. It's not something you can melt down or turn into belly.
Right.
It's very unique. Each
Right.
piece.
Or it's not, if you're involved in the mineral exploration industry, it's not iron or zinc or copper that goes into a building and then in 100 years or 50 years the building gets torn down and goes to the dump.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a bit of a participation aspect from an earth scientist with what I can bring to the industry to say, okay, I've done the other thing for 30 years. the kind of consumable good metal stuff.
There you go, yeah.
I've contributed, and it's been great. This was lovely. But when I was faced with a stone where they can really tell you, like, this is a 10,000 year project,
Yeah.
and it's beyond the rock, and I went, okay, well, I'm not one of those carvers. I might need another 50 years, and I might not have it.
Yeah,
But I'm a geologist. How can he be part of this project, right? Then
right.
instead of finding the lost treasure, I can find the stone that all of those people will make treasure with. And that's a different way of being part of that kind of supply chain, if you'd like to call it, or that process.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's an interesting, it's a way I've never thought about jade before, because it's more like you're handing down almost like a story to generations. And it doesn't just like disappear into electronics.
Well, and it all has a signature.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
you know, every piece of jade has a unique aspect to it and a unique provenance. And even what we've seen in Washington and Wyoming, there's an incredible amount of variation.
Mhm.
So it's not even like diamonds, like here's some diamonds, have some more diamonds, where like, you know, they may all have a serial number if they're big enough, but there's no real story. But with jade, yeah, I mean, it's all very unique, especially when you get to like the the slick inside, the wind slicks and things like that that have been
Oh,
shaped, and they have a very unique.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, when they make carvings and stuff out of that, it's really cool
Well, they use
because
the same like contours of the rock
yeah,
into the sculpture.
and you get
It's
this beautiful
incredible.
natural shape, plus, you know, they enhance it, and a good carver takes the story from the stone instead of pushing a story onto the stone. They find the story that's there and bring it to life, which
Yeah.
is really cool. And we saw that in China. I mean, in ways that I could never imagine. Like the creativity was just mind blowing.
Well, and the craftsmanship.
Yeah, unparalleled.
Yeah.
Just really cool. And the variety was,
Mhm.
it was as broad as you could possibly imagine.
no, for sure. And you know, I since 2019, where you were there, it's difficult to imagine the rate of change, um, both in terms of the economy which supports these endeavors and the technology that allows for these endeavors. And then the third one is that, you know, the resource to supply equation, because I was in China on a copper deal in 2005. It's not that long ago in
No,
Beijing, and I had access to people that were my guides and my translators and all of that, right? And I said, "Oh, I've been interested in jade for a very long time. You know, I'm in China now. Could we find a jade market? Could we find a jade workshop?" 2005. Um, they looked around and they said, "Well, there's this little jade market that's kind of like behind the fish market, and there's this one store."
wow.
And like, it was a non-existent industry.
So what changed then?
Middle class?
Middle class, money,
Hmm.
Yeah, money.
going back to the roots. You also had a really big shift in terms of um, permissibility from the middle class to go back to the roots. Because if you go back to Mao Zedong, which is the way forward, the march forward demanded that you renege or forget or renounce everything that had made China great, including the jade arts.
Right.
Mm,
Yep. It was only forward.
that makes sense.
It was only forward, and the way to go forward is to break down the past and renounce it.
Right.
So the idea of owning jade or carving jade for a very long time, I mean, the jade carvers like Master Chu that we met, you know, they said the China politically had 100 years of humiliation,
Right.
you know, between the German, the French, the British, and everybody else trying to carve out what China was,
Yeah.
until after some very painful rebirth processes redefined itself. But jade was the fundamental identity of China. And until it was safe to do so again, they only kind of carved, they had a few thousand carvers carving jade for the tourist trade because they needed foreign currency.
Right.
So in politics, they talk about the 100 years of humiliation, but in the jade carvers, they talk about the 100 years of silence,
Mm,
which is the jade workshops were not making noise.
Right.
mm,
It was their lost history, their lost craft, their lost the essence of their culture that had been suppressed. So 2005, I go there, hard to find a jade shop. One jade store. I only bought one piece of jade. And then you're there in 2019, which is like this.
Yeah.
And there are now hundreds of thousands of carvers creating works of art that, even in the history of China, they're just next level.
mhm.
Oh yeah, and we saw the museum in Shanghai, and they had amazing carvings of jade history. But yeah, what they're doing now, like with the tools they have now, and the hand tools and the the Dremel, and like it just game changer. It's incredible how they've been able to adopt it. Yeah,
Oh,
China.
and it goes beyond that because we were trying to talk about the acceleration.
Yeah,
So you were there in 2019, and I know that we visited as a group. One of the first guys in Suzhou that kind of had a 3D carving
yeah.
the machine.
See,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a CNC. He was just kind of getting started,
yeah,
and he had a single axis machine, right?
yeah,
And at the time, we're looking at about 400 to 500,000 carvers in China overall. Here we are in 2025, because one machine will replace 20 carvers,
yeah.
roughly speaking. And in 2019, maybe 5% overall of the jade was being carved by machine.
Oh yeah, yeah. The ones we saw were like in a back room, experimental. You had a couple of them set up.
They're down to 5 axes machines, and what I hear is that it's probably 70 to 80%.
Wow.
Things change so quickly in China, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, especially in resources. Um, the amount that China's changed just in the last 3, 4 decades, it's just insane. Like the compared to like other countries, like things change in developed countries and first world countries, but China's rise and like the amount of just resource consumption and change, culture change and everything that's happened there, it's really mind blowing. It's crazy. So like you hear something like that and like it's almost hard to believe if you don't really kind of study and understand some of the other things that have happened in China over the same time period, but like their adaptation of technology
That's
is
insane.
unparalleled because there's not all the red tape and restrictions and everything. So like the big carving houses are like, well, 90% of the people are going to lose their job. See you later. Yeah, machines are here. They're taking it over.
Well, it's a trade-off, right? It's like we don't need 30 low-wage people, and maybe if those people don't have to work a low-wage job, they're going to pursue a better career or better education or whatever,
Right.
right? So the replacement of people with technology it's an evolution. And I always go back when we come to this topic, I always go back to when I had my first overseas job, and that was in Georgetown in British Guyana, which I mentioned earlier was like a real shithole. And it had a small expat community, and the expat community had like money,
Right.
whereas the locals had no money and no food. And after the workday, when I was in town, we'd go to the bar and we'd hang out. And a lot of the bars had an outside terrace because it's a tropical country, right? And we would have, of course, because when everybody has no money, like zero money, and you have $1, you have a lot of money.
Right.
And it was very common at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning when I was like too late to have a lot of kids come up. Please. And of course you feel bad but we also had another group of parents that would come and try to educate us people trying to disrupt the system, saying, if you give the 7-year-old $1, and this is very harsh, but that was what I was exposed to. It says, you give that 7-year-old or that 8-year-old $1, which is the equivalent of a week's worth of income. All you're saying to them is, show up at the bar at 1 o'clock in the morning. Don't go to school.
Right.
Just do this. And those were parents. They were telling us, do not give our children that kind of money because we want them to go to school, to have a goal, and not be, beggars.
Right.
Smart parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the parents were out.
Yeah, that's good. So shifting back to Jade.
Yes.
Why explore for Jade in the United States?
My first answer to that question is because we can.
Yeah.
Because when I looked at all the literature, I thought there was a really big lack of application of modern techniques, technologies. It's been a prospector's game.
Right.
So there was never any more of a big picture than, I'll go up with my pickup, and if I'm lucky, I'll bring some home and it'll pay for gas.
Right.
There's also been a lack of understanding of how big monetarily the space of jade is. Right. Why would you go spend $100 exploring for something that's worth 10?
Right.
But that was part of my awakening, and in a way, your awakening as well.
It was
in
a
China.
larger market than I'd ever realized. Because I would have guessed, like, what's the global jade market? $100 million a year, maybe.
Oh, before I went to China, I thought it was 10 million, and I'd been carving jade for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's 30 billion.
It's
Wow.
amazing.
And you know, this is where like the main buyer, being China, who has all the data, has absolutely no incentive to tell you how much they're paying for it,
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
right? Because well, it's worth nothing, so we'll buy it for nothing and 5%.
Yeah,
And in a way, the only reason which I was exposed, and then you got exposed to it as well, is because I was invited in China, not at an economic jade symposium. I was invited as a carver where the Chinese would talk openly about the importance of the space.
right,
So they never thought I was a potential economic either competitor or contributor.
right,
So you know they would never tell a producer how much they're buying and what they're paying.
right. And
But
it's a notoriously opaque economy as well. I mean, there's all the economic data that we have from China all comes from the state, and like all data that comes from any state, it all has some sort of a political,
Oh, yeah.
bias to it. So yeah,
there's,
and
there's
for a market like Jade, yeah, none of your business, right?
yeah. You know, it's just like you know, I have there's the new report that just came out, which is really kind of interesting, and it's the first real public report that I've seen come out of the Gem and Jewelry Trade Association of China.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it came out in January, and it was the only time I've got any kind of published correlation to all of the workshops and the data that we had been privy to.
Yeah, and collected through, yeah, just boots on the ground, interviews.
Boots
Yeah,
on the ground.
yeah,
And it's not just boots on the ground. You're not just going to an economic symposium where they're telling you, oh, yeah, it's worth this much money. But we were in the carving towns, right? And you saw the expositions, you saw the product.
yep. The
Um,
markets, the hagglers back and forth and talking to the carvers. And yeah, I mean, the data that we collected was all, yeah, none of it was from a report.
correct, correct. Well, I got a first report this January. So it's the Chinese Jewelry Market Report 2024, Gems and Jewelry Trade Association of China. And I introduced this data into a talk I gave in Tucson to at the Accredited Gemologist Association, which is a fairly high-level gemology association. You know, in the West, it's one of the top. And I kind of shook them a little bit because we think that diamond is king.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
And then we have colored stones. And then we have pearls.
Yeah.
And then there's this thing that in the West nobody knows anything about, right?
Mhm.
Uh, the stats that were published, I'll send you that report.
I'd love to see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the data is only collected from Chinese publicly traded jewelry company that do actual reporting,
Okay.
like Chow Tai Fook, you know, and a couple of other ones.
Yeah.
So it's public companies, not including Suzhou, not including the master carvers, not including the markets.
Right.
So they said diamond market 2024, $8.2 billion
Wow.
just in China.
Yeah, that's still significant. Yeah.
Well, that's $8,200 million.
Yeah.
People forget what a billion is.
Yeah, that's still really significant. And is that include industrial or that's just jewelry?
Nope, they broke it down by diamond. So
Okay.
it's cut diamond, not rough diamond.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Colored stone market, 4.3 billion. Pearl, 4.8 billion. Jade, 20.5 billion.
Wow. Huh.
That's wild.
Wow.
Just in one country.
Just in one country.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And
So,
I'm not, when I read the report, I'm not even sure that that includes Hong Kong.
yeah, what they define as China is interesting,
Huh.
and it may not, but the ratio, the diamond to jade ratio, and the cut stone and all that, that you total the rest up, and the jade's still bigger.
Oh, you're not even coming